My name is Justin Potter. This is a lot of people. We get terminology here, and a lot of people don't really know we say next gen pastors a lot, and so a lot of people don't really know. But basically, my wife Amy and I are the next gen pastors. She oversees all of the children's areas, and I oversee all of the students or youth areas. And so, if you didn't know who we were or what that's about, that's our deal here. And so, you're basically at a youth service today. So welcome. It's going to be a lot of fun. You can tell I got my jersey on. I'm ready to go. Right? Got my sneakers on. So it's going to be fun. And so I wanted to kind of start off today because I'm going to challenge everybody's thinking a little bit. As you can tell, I've got my basketball jersey on. I've got on my basketball shoes. I got my bag, my gym bag. I'm ready to go this morning. And I know, listen, I've lived in Decatur my whole life. So I know that football here is number one, right? Anybody? So, okay. Well, that would have been a good opportunity for all of you Alabama fans to yell. You want to try it again? All right. So football, how about football? Anybody? Okay. So we're gonna wake up eventually. Athens is over there yelling. I know they're fired up. How about Auburn? Anybody Auburn fans? Okay. Listen, I'm an Auburn fan, but they're not yelling about football. They're yelling because Auburn's basketball team is in the top 10 right now. Y'all didn't know that because we're all football fans. But Auburn's basketball team is really good this year, and so they're kind of beating everybody. And so I think they're like, I don't know, I think they've lost 2 games all year, maybe 3. So they're doing really, really well. And so I love basketball. So I'm going to stretch you guys a little bit today because I know not everybody's a basketball fan, but I love basketball. And so growing up, as you can tell, I know I look really tall on stage, but I wasn't really born built for basketball. That's really not my, it just wasn't how I was designed evidently, right? But I love basketball. And so I was always limited to one position on the court. I was limited to, anybody want to take a shot? Point guard. That's pretty much it, right? The painted area under the goal, I never went down there. Didn't have any business down there. My job was to stay out front and just dribble the ball and just get the ball to the right people and let them score, right? So I was a point guard, and I loved that part of the game because it was very technical, and there's a lot of things that people just don't realize that point guards have to do, right? And so I'm wearing my John Stockton jersey. I actually borrowed this one from Zach Hudson, so he's not here this morning, but this is his. So appreciate you, Zach. But this is, anybody know who this is? Utah Jazz. Okay. Anybody know who the player is, number 12 for Utah Jazz? Some of the older people in the room might know, okay? John Stockton, right? Okay, so he played 19 years in the NBA, which, is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. 19 years, all for the same team, the Utah Jazz. Always played for the Jazz. And he's he's in the Hall of Fame. He was on the 92 Dream Team. He's got all these records and all these things, but he's the all-time leader in assists, which means he passed the ball to people that scored more times than anybody else in the history of basketball. He has 15,806 assists. Now, I'm just going to help all the non-basketball people. An assist is I pass the ball to you, you score within 2 dribbles, okay? So if you dribble 3 times, it's not an assist because you manufactured your own shot. But he got people the ball where they were already in position to score. And so he got them the ball 15,806 times. Anybody want to take a shot? How many shots he actually took in his career in 19 years? About the same number. So he passed the ball to people to score just as much as he scored himself or shot the ball himself, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about it. We see people like Kobe Bryant who scores 81 points in one game by himself. And we think, how many assists did he have in that game? I looked it up. It's like 4, right? Means he was not passing very much, right? He was just taking the ball and doing his thing. And so, but yeah, John Stockton's really cool. And I know everybody's wondering right now, how does this relate to anything that we're going to talk about today? Well, we're in the series and we're kind of wrapping it up. We're here towards the end of it. And it's called Heart for the House. And it's all about our core values here. And so the core value that we're going to talk about today is generosity. And so I thought it would be cool to talk about, tie it in somebody that made a career, made a life, and made their name famous really for the way that they gave things and the way that they distributed and assisted people. And so I really thought it would kind of kick us off really good to just kind of let everybody in on that. And then I want to start with the definition of generous, because I know we hear words a lot of times and we're familiar with the word, but maybe we don't really know what it means, or we don't really know what the definition is. And so here's the definition of generous. I looked it up and it says, characterized by a noble or kindly spirit. In other words, compassionate or charitable. Liberal in giving or open-minded, open-handed. And then marked by abundance or ample proportions, which means full or more than enough. And so that's what generous means. And so I was kicking around the idea of like, how can we talk about generosity? And so I thought basketball's perfect, right? And everybody's like, I don't get it. Well, I'm going to show you, and we're going to start off talking about this thing, this idea in basketball. And so there is a very fundamental thing in basketball, not a basketball, okay? But there's a fundamental base position or posture that you have to have, and it's called triple threat. Anybody know what triple threat is? Any basketball fans? Okay, good. Well, we're gonna go to camp today. I'm gonna teach you guys some camp stuff, right? Jackson, you want to help me? I'm gonna let Jackson come help me because my skinny jeans aren't gonna help me right here in this situation. So, and he's a much better ball handler than I am, anyway. So triple threat is the basic position of basketball. It's where easy. Okay, I'm gonna stand over here. You stay over there. All right. So triple threat is the basic kind of fundamental, posture of basketball. It's that way. Like every NBA player, every camp player, every high school player. This is kind of what you learn when you're what, 5? You learned this when you were 4 or 5 at camp, 6. So you learn this very early at camps, and they drill it in your head over and over again. Well, triple threat is kind of your basic position, and it's the position where a lot of different things can happen out of it. And so I'm going to let Jackson help me here. And so, you ready? Okay, so triple threat is you can pass, you can dribble, and you can shoot. Those are the 3 things that you can do out of this position. So show everybody what triple threat is. Okay, so triple threat is this is kind of your base posture, base position. And so, all right, turn towards me. Now, triple threat, all right. Now pass. So you can pass out of triple threat, okay? All right, you can shoot. See, it's all the same posture. So you start the same, and everything's the same. Go ahead and shoot it. All right. Now, what's the third thing? Dribble, okay? So triple threat. Now, dribble. Right hand dribble. All right, triple threat. Left hand dribble. Triple threat. Crossover. Triple threat, behind the back crossover. All right, triple threat. All right, I'm gonna get him on this one. He nailed it Thursday, but this is called the forehand dribble. Go, forehand dribble. Triple threat. I'm so jealous. All right. I used to be able to do it. Not really. I could never do that. That was the camp thing that I could never do. And everybody, I was so frustrated with that. Thank you, Jackson. So you can see triple threat is it's a very, very important thing for basketball because it's the posture in which you pass. It's the posture, the same thing in which you shoot, and it's the same thing that you dribble from and you begin your move around the court. So everything kind of comes out of that position. And so it's the basic thing that we need to talk about today because we're going to talk about what it means as far as generosity and what it means, like what does triple threat generosity look like? And so just like I said, shooting, okay? So I'm going to refer to this a lot. So shooting is kind of the first thing that you think about when you think about basketball. Most people, you see point totals on ESPN or whatever. You see highlights, everybody's shooting the ball. You rarely see somebody pass the ball on ESPN and then the shot doesn't go in, right? Usually there's always results in a bucket. So shooting is very important. It's number one. But here's the thing about shooting. Shooting, everybody in the NBA, everybody in college basketball, everybody in high school basketball, even down to Jackson's little 11 and 12, 13-year-old league, shooting is expected, right? How many of you know you watch a basketball game, you expect to see people shoot the ball, right? You expect that. Well, how does that relate to generosity? Well, shooting is like tithing. You're expected to tithe, right? Everybody's expected to shoot the ball. Everybody's expected to tithe. It's like the thing that, if you're a believer in Jesus, like you're just expected to do that. The Bible talks about it. It talks about your first 10% and being obedient, right? And so it's just expected. Well, then there's the second aspect, which is passing, right? And so passing, what does that look like in generosity? And how does that relate to like triple threat generosity? Well, passing is the part where you see somebody that needs it. You see a man in need, and you do what you got to do to get it to them. And so that's where the passing aspect comes in generosity. And then the third thing is dribbling. And so if you're in triple threat and you're the point guard like I was, I did a lot of dribbling, not because I thought I was like fancy with the ball, which I kind of, I tried to be, but I wasn't. And so, but you dribble because you're moving around trying to find different angles. You're moving around trying to create openings for other people, and you're looking for opportunities to get the ball to the person that's open or the person that needs it the most in that moment. Because, as a point guard, and this is kind of what I thrived on, was the opportunity to put somebody else in a good position to score. And that was the thing for me that kind of made it so special, and that's why I loved being a point guard. I was not a very good shooter. I was not a very good, I wasn't really good at anything other than defense and being a point guard. I could dribble and I could pass, but shooting I was not very good at. And so I was kind of like that guy that you see on that. If you go to the court now, like if we went down to like the boys club or like the rec center at 6 a.m., you'd see all those old guys in there, that shoot jump shots, and that's all they do. They just stand there and they just wait on the ball and shoot jumpers. But all those guys used to be great passers. But as you get older, you just like, I'm just going to stand in my spot and just you throw me the ball and I'm going to shoot, right? And so triple threat generosity, it was like this idea that I had it was really, I can't even tell you how it just came about. But it was this idea, and I thought, triple threat, if we're going to be a triple threat, if we're going to be very generous people, we have to start with the basic posture, which is being obedient, being compassionate, and then looking for opportunities, right? And so that's the base, that's the start, that's triple threat. And so John Stockton was a good one for me to talk about today, because I'm going to take you into another part of this idea. But John Stockton had more assists, and if you look at stats, looks like he's the most generous person in the history of basketball as far as giving the ball away, giving it to teammates, putting people in position to win. But John Stockton had in his career one triple-double. Triple-double. Anybody know what a triple-double is? A few people? I know the people in Athens do. They love basketball over there at Athens High School, so I know they know. But a triple-double is where you get 3 categories of stats, and you have double digits in each category. For example, you have, 10 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists. So you rack up stats in multiple categories. A couple of weeks ago, Jackson, we were talking on I think it was on a Friday night, and he had a game on Saturday, and I said, hey, man, it's been a kind of an up and down year and just struggling a little bit. Not really him personally, but the team just trying to find their way and get together and play as a team. And so I said, hey, man, I think it would help if you kind of set a goal for the day. Set a goal for tomorrow, and what is your thing you're going to go after? And he was like, well, I've never had a triple-double. I'd like to have a triple-double. And I was like, okay, I don't know how many 12-year-olds are out shooting for triple-doubles, but whatever. Most of them they just want to catch it and jack it up and just shoot as many times as they can. But he was like, I think I want to get a triple-double. And I was like, well, that's cool. And so he goes out and he gets 14 points. I think it was 10 rebounds, and then had 7 steals. So he got really, really close. But he only played 2.5 quarters that day. And so I was like, you know what, we'll just give you that one. We'll call that. Because if you'd have played the other quarter and a half, I'm pretty sure you'd have got a triple-double. So we just chalk it up. Well, then yesterday, he had another game, and I was like, okay, well, you going after the same thing as the elusive triple-double, that's kind of, if you're in basketball world, that's kind of what you want to do. It shows that you're a good all-around player. Well, he goes, yeah, sure, I still want to get a triple-double. Well, yesterday was a much tighter game against some of his friends and some of his family from, that were all piled up on this other team, and so it was a tough game. And he ended up getting, I think, 16 points and had 16 rebounds, but then fell short on the other categories. And so, once again, the triple-double is still elusive. You'll get it eventually, man, I promise. but it just the triple-double is important today for us because it shows that you're an all-around person. You're an all-around player. You're very versatile. And the big part of that comes from the triple threat line of you've got to be able to get people the ball and put them in the right position. And so a triple-double, we look at people, if you know anything about basketball, LeBron James probably comes to mind because he's an all-around player. He's got 63 career triple-doubles in 15 years. Russell Westbrook hasn't been playing near as long. He has 95 career triple-doubles. He set the record last year for the most in one season. If you're an NBA fan, they play 82 regular season games. He had 42 triple-doubles. So basically every other game, he got a triple-double, which is unheard of. That's an all-time record. Nobody's ever gotten that many. And so Russell Westbrook right now is number 2 on the all-time list of triple-doubles. He has 95. The person that he's chasing is Oscar Robertson. Anybody know Oscar Robertson? Okay, this guy's from the 60s and 70s, so you got to go way back. But Oscar Robertson had 181 triple-doubles in his career, okay? Almost 20% of the time he was on the court, he was racking up a triple-double. And so this is a big idea when we talk about generosity, because if you're a triple-double type of giver or you're a triple-double generosity type of person, you know, these guys that I talked about, they're not out there looking for 1 rebound. They're not out there looking for 1 point. They're not out there looking for 1 assist. They're looking for double digits in every category. They're looking not just for 1, but they're looking for an abundance of these statistics, right? They're looking for, I want multiples. I want a lot of rebounds. I want a lot of points. I want a lot of assists. And so that's where this idea of triple-double generosity comes from, and it really is an abundant giving in 3 different categories. Okay, so we kind of have to wrap our minds around the triple-double idea. And so we've got 3 categories, and we're gonna talk about abundance in those 3 categories. And the 3 categories, Pastor Kirk mentioned them a little bit last week when he was talking about servanthood, and they really tie together. Servanthood and generosity really are close and related and connected. And so the 3 categories in a triple-double generous person are your time, your talent, and your treasure. And so your time. What does it look like to be abundant with your time? Well, let's just say you go to work and your work schedule is 9 to 5, okay? Are you abundant in your generosity with that time? Or are you just there? You know what I'm saying? Like, we just go to work sometimes and we're just there. We're riding the clock. We're waiting to punch out. Or we can be abundant with our generosity of our time, and we can make the most out of that, and we can impact people's lives inside our workplace. We can maybe lead up and lead our boss. We can do a lot of different things to be generous with our time, right? Your time with your family, same situation. Do you make the most out of the time that you have with your family or with your kids or with your wife or your husband? And how are you generous with that time? Or, on the other hand, on the flip side of that, is it, oh, this is my time. I worked all day. This is my time. So we have to look at time. We have to look at talent, you know, all the gifts that God has given us. We've all got different gifts. Everybody in this room has different gifts than the person sitting next to you. You've got something special about you. How are you generous with that gift? You know, there's people in here that can sing really well. I'm not one of those people, but they can sing really well. But yet they never share that gift with the people around them. They're not generous with it at all. Maybe it's because of insecurity, or maybe it's just because of, you know, a thought or whatever, but we're just not generous with our talents. You know, there are people here that can, secretly, you can build things like nobody's business, but you don't necessarily share that. You're not really generous with that. You're not looking for opportunities to share that, you know. And then the last thing is your treasure. And of course, this is the part where everybody gets a little uncomfortable, because the youth pastor's on stage. They trying to pull our heartstrings. He's got his basketball jersey on. Now he's going after your money, right? Let me assure you, I promise you, I'm not coming after your money today. That's not what this is about. It's much bigger than that. I want everybody here to live a triple-double lifestyle. And if that impacts your pocketbook and your checkbook, then that's a byproduct. And that's not what I'm after today. When I talk about your treasure, it's the things that you value the most. You know, the things in your life that you value. How are you sharing those things? How are you generous with those things? Do you give? You know, an example for me, if you know me, you know some of the things that I treasure the most outside of family and friends and that kind of thing. But like, if we're talking material things, the things that I love the most and always have, cars and shoes. Now, I know you're like, see, people are laughing because they know, right? So cars and shoes, I've always loved those 2 things. Right? Outside of family and friends, like I wish I had the money to just go buy a new car every day and just trade it out. I love cars. Same thing with shoes, except I wouldn't necessarily trade them out. I'd probably like to just buy them and keep them in my closet and just collect them, right? I just love them. And so what is your treasure? What is your thing? Okay, let me go back and show you a good example of what I'm talking about by being a triple-double generosity. You're a triple-double giver. Oscar Robertson, the guy that I talked about a minute ago that had 181 triple-doubles in his career, right? He's world-class, world-famous for this. He shared his talent with the world, right? He gave his talent for almost 20 years of basketball in the NBA and set the precedent for what it means to be generous in basketball and to be abundant and all about abundance, because he's just triple-double after triple-double after triple-double. Well, then, so he shared his talent with the world, right? But then he retired, and then he began to share his time. And so what he did to share his time and to give away his time was he became the Players Association president for the NBA, and he actually spent years and years and years going to battle and going to bat for all of the NBA players and coaches and owners to make sure that everybody was treated fairly and that business was working well across the board. And so he was very, very generous with his time. And then his treasure, this is the one that gets me. At the age of 59, almost 60 years old, Oscar Robertson literally gave away the biggest treasure that he probably ever gave in his life. He had a daughter that was 33, and she had lupus. And he actually gave one of his kidneys to his daughter. And so he not only gave his time and his talent in the world of basketball, but he gave a treasure. Like, how many of you know your kidney is a treasure, right? You got to have that thing. But he gave it away. He was like, you know what? Here it is. And so that just shows you the type of person that he was, and it translated to the court, right? And so all of this talk about basketball, everybody say abundance. And if this is the part where you're trying to like check out because you're like, I'm not a basketball fan, let me reel you back in, because there's a lot of examples that line up with this in the Bible. And so I'm going to talk about a few of those, but I really kind of wanted to set the stage and just kind of show you some worldly kind of like, examples that you see on TV. If you watch ESPN for more than 5 minutes in the month of March, you're going to see all of these things happen, right? And so Abraham was kind of a great example for many, many things in the Bible. And in Genesis 22, there's a great example of him and his obedience and being, we talked about the triple threat, generosity, and what that looks like, and just the basics of obedience and willing to give abundantly and looking for an opportunity to give. Well, in Genesis 22, this is the part that most of you guys have heard of where Abraham was asked by God to give or to basically sacrifice his son Isaac. Right? And so he goes and he lays him on this rock, and we all kind of probably get the picture that Isaac is like 3 or 4 years old, but he was like a grown man at this time, right? So he's laying his adult son down and is ready to sacrifice his adult son just because God said to. And so there's the obedience, right? And just a little side note, I have one son, and you guys saw him a minute ago, and there's nothing. I'm just being for real right now. There is nothing in the world that could ever make me consider sacrificing my son. And if you're a parent and you've got sons or daughters or whatever, like you can relate to that, right? There's nothing in the world that you can go, you know what? I would sacrifice my son for that. It's not happening. So wrap your mind around the fact that Abraham was like, yes, sir. God, if you want me to kill my son for you, then I will. Blows my mind every time. And so he was obedient. But then we look at another story of Abraham in Genesis 13. He's standing with his nephew Lot, and they're trying to figure out who's going to get what property, and they're trying to split up this big piece of land that they have. And there's a little bit of a tension here because they've kind of had a little bit of a history of just some tension building, and they're kind of at each other. And so Abraham, most of us would go, well, I'll take this part because I'm the oldest and I'm the smartest and I'm the wisest and God loves me the most. So I'm going to take this part, and then this is your piece right here. But Abraham actually says, you know what, Lot, you pick whatever you want. Take the big side if you want to, and the side that's the most fruitful. That's fine. You can have that, and I'll take this piece. And so not only was he obedient, but he was very generous in his giving, even with his nephew who had a little tension, right, and a little history with him. And so we see those examples with Abraham. But then there's a story in Luke 19 that I really, really want to kind of talk about today. And it's the story of a wee little man. Most of you know who I'm talking about, okay? I'm going to start reading, and I'll talk about it as we go. So starting in verse 1 of Luke 19, Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector. in the region, and he had become very rich. See, Zacchaeus had that NBA money, okay? Verse 3 and 4, he tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. I can relate. Anybody? Right? Anytime there's a group picture, I'm like, I'm in the front row, right? It's just how it is. So he runs ahead. He climbs a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. And so he had the NBA money, but not the NBA height, right? But like a good point guard, Zacchaeus knew he might have to move around a little bit and find a better spot so he would have better court vision, so that he could see better, right? And this is just a side note. If you want to see Jesus moving through your life, if you want to see that bad enough, you'll find a way to see it, okay? Zacchaeus said, I'm going to climb this tree. I want to see him move, right? And so verse 5, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus. He called him by name. He said, Zacchaeus, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. Keep in mind, this guy was a tax collector, okay? The people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner. They grumbled. Everybody say haters. All right, so Zacchaeus had some haters in this little area right here, because he said, you know what? I'm going to go because Jesus called me. And immediately he had a little opposition, right? People that may have liked him, people that may not have liked him. They said, I can't believe he's going to Zacchaeus' house. He's a sinner, right? How many, you people, you got some people in your life like that, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that they're going to their house. I cannot believe they're going to hang out with them, right? That's what he was facing right here. And there's another translation of this that it kind of goes a little more in depth. I'm not sure if it was like a commentary that I read or what, but it was talking about the people that were yelling and the people that were displeased and the haters in the crowd. And it said that one of the guys was really, really kind of short and pudgy and redheaded and freckled, and he actually yelled out, "You're killing me, Smalls." He actually yelled that? That's not real. I just made that up. Some of you guys, you'll get that later, okay? Some of you will hit you about lunchtime. You'll be like, I got it. Smalls, Zacchaeus, I got it. Okay, moving on. Verse 8, meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and says, I will give half my wealth to the poor. And if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. So he didn't just give away half of his money, right? He did what was expected. He gave away half to the poor. But then it says, with the other half, he gave back 4 times as much. See, he paid back abundantly. So he went above and beyond what was expected. Verse 9 and 10, Jesus responds, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be, keyword, a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. See, Jesus calls him a true son of Abraham. That's important because back in the time of these Jewish religious people and the leaders of the time, as far as the religious leaders, they called themselves sons of Abraham because they were physically connected to Abraham. They were in the line, right? They were born from the person that was born from the person that came from Abraham up the line. And so they were physically connected. This is much bigger than that, because those people that were physically connected, they weren't spiritually connected. They abused their physical connection to Abraham, and they felt like they were better than everybody else, and they felt like they didn't have to do as much, and they didn't have to live the right way. They could get away with a lot more because of their physical connection. But Zacchaeus is like, you know what? I'm not physically related, but I know spiritually now Jesus has said, you're a true son of Abraham, which means you understand. John 8 talks a little bit about this too. Jesus says, if you were true sons of Abraham, you would follow his example. His example was in his generosity. If you look back to the story of Isaac and how he was willing to give up his son, you look back to the story of Lot and how he was so abundantly generous with his nephew. That's the example. And so Jesus says, you're a true son of Abraham because you are following his example. You are living out what Abraham showed and what he taught us to do. And so that's why that's super important. See, Zacchaeus went from a collector to a giver. And so he had this revelation, Zacchaeus did. Something kind of clicked for him, and he realized that he had collected treasures that he didn't really deserve. So he had been given things, whether he was tax collecting or whatever, his wealth, he realized, I don't really deserve this. I kind of just got this somehow. And so the triple-double giver is the person that realizes that what's yours isn't really yours. And that's part of what makes a triple-double type of giver so special. See, sometimes it's better for the team if the ball is in somebody else's hands, not mine. Okay? That's what a good point guard knows, is I'm not the primary scorer. I know that if I get the ball to Michael Jordan, anybody know the point guard that played with Michael Jordan? Okay. So, point made. Anybody know any point guard that's ever played with Kobe Bryant? All right. Stumped everybody, right? So, the point is these guys were doing their part. They were doing what they were supposed to do. They were getting the ball to the right person. They were making sure that what they had, they understood, it's not mine. It's not mine to shoot. It's mine to give, right? And so that's what a triple-double giver looks like. So what does it take to become a triple-double giver? All right, this is kind of the life application part. These are the 4 things that you want to write down if you're a note taker. These are the main points of the day. So what does it take to become a triple-double giver? Well, first is obedience and discipline. Okay? If you're going to be an NBA point guard, you got to have obedience and you got to be disciplined. What does that look like in our generosity? Very simply, it's the first 10%. It's what's expected. It's the obedience part of it, right? God says you should give your first 10. Give your first. Well, first of all, you have to be obedient, and then you have to be disciplined. It's not I give my first in January, and then I'll do it again in December. It's I'm going to give my first all the time, every time. It's discipline. Number 2 is court vision, right? If you're going to be a good point guard, if you're going to be a good assist man, if you're going to be a good giver, you have to have court vision. You have to have awareness, right? The definition of generosity says somebody that's looking for an opportunity, liberal in giving. They're looking for an opportunity to give. So you got to be aware, because if you can't see the person in need, then you can't get them the ball, right? As a point guard, I teach kids this all the time. Jackson's got some kids on his team, and we talk about this every chance we get, is they'll get the ball, and the first thing they do is their head's down. And they're dribbling all over the court, but their head is down. They cannot see anything. You can't see to shoot. You can't see to pass. You can't see to do anything because your head's looking at the ground. Sometimes in our generosity, we do that, don't we? Sometimes we walk around and we're just our mind is on our things and our money, so our head is kind of down, and we're missing opportunities to give. We're missing opportunities to be generous. And so we have to have court vision. We have to be aware. The third thing is to facilitate and distribute. This is where the action comes in. This is where you have to execute the pass, right? A point guard can dribble all day long. He can see the man, but if he never makes the move and passes it, that guy's not going to score. That team is not going to do well if the point guard is the only one ever holding the ball. And so you have to facilitate and distribute. You have to execute the pass. And then the fourth thing, this is the biggest. This is my favorite, right? You have to be willing to take some risks. You have to be willing to take some risks. My dad used to get so frustrated with me when I played basketball because I was a risk taker, right? Oh my gosh, man. I would come up the court and throw a behind the back pass for no reason whatsoever, right? I may have a wide open layup, but it was just fun for me to make sure that I throw it behind the back, and this guy is going to score because the defender has no clue what just happened, right? Or sometimes it may be a fake and then pass it over here or whatever. And so, you watch highlight videos and I'm just telling you, I was not a great basketball player, but if it was like a street ball thing, I was good, right? Because I was like a globetrotter, a little white globetrotter, right? So and I actually saw one at Huntsville Hospital like a couple weeks ago. I saw a globetrotter walking through the hallway, and I almost stopped him and asked him how I could audition, because I was like, dude, let me try out. What does it take, right? I can do all that stuff. I can dribble through people's legs. I can throw alley-oops, right? I can do all of that. So I was willing to take some risks, right? I was willing to take a shot at something. I was willing to just, give something up and just take a shot, see if it worked. Right? So you got to be willing to take some risks. Another way you could say that is faith. You've got to have faith. So in your generosity, you have to have a little faith when you distribute. that maybe that person's going to score with that ball. And so just like the NBA, when it comes to giving, when it comes to your generosity, size matters. Everybody say size matters. Size matters. And here's what I mean by that. There's a story in the book of Mark that most of us are probably familiar with. I'm going to read a little bit about it, and I think you're going to see that size does matter. So Jesus is at the temple, and he's teaching and doing what Jesus does, right? And so this is where it starts off. It says, sitting across from the offering box, he was observing how the crowd tossed money in for the collection. Many of the rich were making large contributions. One poor widow came up, put in 2 small coins, a measly 2 cents. Jesus called his disciples over and said, the truth is that this poor widow gave more to the collection than all the others put together. All the others gave what they'll never miss. She gave extravagantly what she couldn't afford. She gave her all. And so what you have to see here is that a large donation does not determine your generosity. God is not concerned with the size of your gift. God is concerned with the size of your sacrifice. Here's a couple of examples. Oscar Robertson, who I mentioned a couple times, sacrificed a kidney. Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son. Zacchaeus sacrificed his job, his wealth, his status, his reputation, all the things that he had worked so hard for. He gave it all away, sacrificed it all. The poor widow gave her all. Everything she had, she emptied her pockets. She sacrificed it all. So it's not about what you give. Obviously, it's about what you give up. And so right now, I'm going to just take an opportunity and take a moment, and I'm going to hand it off to Pastor Kirk in Athens. Pastor Kirk, we love you guys, Athens. I hope that maybe you've heard something today that really just kind of spoke specifically to you guys. I believe that God's doing something special in Athens, just as he is here in Decatur. And so we love you guys. Pastor Kirk, y'all have a great morning. And as they're getting set over there, I want to just share some personal stuff with you, if that's okay. Just kind of a personal generosity story. I know Pastor Justin had mentioned it earlier about some stuff that we've been walking through. And I kind of want to share a little bit about it, just so that you guys can kind of see what that looks like. And maybe, so you can relate, okay? Growing up, I had everything I ever needed, right? My parents did. We weren't like loaded, but we weren't poor. We had what we needed. I had everything I ever needed. But I didn't have everything I ever wanted, right? Y'all can relate to that, right? There were things that I wanted that I didn't have, right? I didn't necessarily get the kind of car I wanted when I was 16. I didn't necessarily always get the kind of shoes that I wanted when I was a kid, right? I told you guys about my shoes and my car thing, and that kind of is still in there a little bit, right? Shoes more than cars, but it's still in there. And so I'll tell you, I'll just be honest, it's my mom's fault. It started in the 5th grade. She bought me a pair of Jordans, and my dad was not happy about it, but she bought me a pair of Jordans, and ever since then, that's just where it started. I'm just being real, okay? It was a big deal. So I grew up having everything that I needed, and then I graduated high school, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to start working because I want things. I want a different car. I want a different pair of shoes. I want to buy my own stuff. And so I did the smart thing. I got a job at a shoe store. See, I can give business advice a little bit. Of course, my paychecks were really small because I spent it all on shoes. So I didn't have a lot to live off of, but I had really nice shoes, okay? So I got a job and I started working, and so I just started collecting things, and I started just buying stuff, and I bought cars, and I would buy a car, I would trade cars every 6 months and just get a different car, and I always had different cars and was modifying cars, and then I'd sell them and get a different one and start over. And then I was buying shoes and just collecting shoes, and I would trade shoes for things and sell shoes and buy shoes. And so it just became a lot like Zacchaeus was. I was kind of a tax collector in a sense of just collecting, right? And then I just kind of got to the point where I realized, man, I was kind of a ball hog a little bit. I wasn't really distributing and facilitating the court very much. I was kind of just collecting a lot. I was just gathering. I was kind of like Kobe Bryant, right? I was primarily concerned with me and my point totals and what I could collect. And then something happened. I don't know. I went from Kobe to I went to like a John Stockton kind of guy. And then I just realized like, man, I don't know. Like I just started giving stuff away. And so I would just start giving things. And it just was small stuff, here and there. And I would just, here, you can have that. I don't need it. You can have it. Yeah, sure, it's fine. And I got so much joy out of giving that it just kind of like started just building. And it was kind of like, I don't know, like it was fun to give stuff. And so I went from a collector to a giver, just like Zacchaeus did. But it was kind of this. It was like my shortcoming in basketball, which was my height, right? And what I was gifted with from God. My shortcoming, it changed the way that I played the game. It made me think about basketball differently because I had to think differently because I wasn't like everybody else. I wasn't tall. I couldn't jump out of the gym. I couldn't shoot really well. So I had to be very specific in the way that I played the game. My shortcoming in life, which was my generosity, my selfishness, was the same thing. Like it made me realize, and the fact that I knew I could never measure up, that's what made me realize that I'm going to have to think about giving differently. And so I became a different type of player, a different type of giver, because I realized I had a moment and I just simply realized one big thing. It was like one big idea that I knew I was never going to measure up to God's standard of giving, right? I knew that I could never outgive God. And so I was like, man, that is like, it blew my mind to think about that because God is the greatest giver in the history of history, right? You can do the top 10 all-time career givers. God's at the top because he gave us Jesus, which is the reason that you're all here today. So obviously, God was a giver of givers. He understood what it meant to give abundantly, right? Abraham was the closest in my mind because he was this close to giving his son, and God stopped him. Nobody else that I know of has been willing to sacrifice their son, especially their grown son, right? And so God himself sacrificed his very own son. And the Bible, either the Bible's true or it's not. If you believe it's true, if you believe one little piece of it, you got to believe the whole thing. And in the Bible, it says that we are made in his image. We are made in the image of God. To me, how does that relate to generosity? Well, I'm very practical. God gave his son. While I'm not going to give my son, I can give abundantly and be abundantly generous because I'm supposed to be more and more like God each and every day. So for me, it's easy just to equate and go, you know what? I'm just going to give. God wants me to give. I'm just going to give. He gave. Abraham gave. Zacchaeus turned into a giver, right? All these people give. I'm going to give too. One of my favorite athletes is LeBron James. Jackson has on a LeBron James jersey. He's one of my favorite athletes, period. I think the guy could pretty much do anything in any sport. He's a freak, right? But I love LeBron James because while he racks up triple doubles and sometimes he kind of looks like a crybaby a little bit, and some people get they see what happens on the court and they think, oh, he's so selfish. But what you don't know about LeBron James is maybe you do know this, he has a foundation off the court that he started the day he graduated high school. It's called the LeBron James Family Foundation. And what they do is they provide, like, he's basically just said, hey, look, if you graduate from the Akron City school system, you're getting a full scholarship to college on me. A lot of people don't know that. So by the time it's all said and done, he will have given almost $50 million of his own money for kids in Akron to go to college. That's pretty generous. That's an abundance. And we say, well, he's got millions of dollars and whatever. Yeah, but it's not the size of the gift. It's the size of the sacrifice. And what you may not see is the time and the talent and the treasure that goes into those scholarships being handed out. And so there's tons of examples throughout the Bible, just in our world that we can look at and go, man, these people are so abundantly generous. For us personally, like I said, we just started kind of giving some stuff away. One good example was we kind of cleared out our house in a way. Josh Marsh came to our house one day and was like, did y'all get robbed? I was like, no, man, we cleaned up a little bit. But we literally like took down everything in our living room and just, I think Amy might have put it on Facebook or something or whatever, but it was like, we were just giving stuff away. People were just coming to the house. It looked like we were doing illegal stuff at our house because it was like constantly cars coming in the driveway and leaving. I'm sure the neighbors were like, hello, 911? But we were just giving stuff away. Well, then we had some friends that we went to a birthday party for their son, and one of our friends just said, hey, look, I just felt like I was supposed to buy you these lamps for your house. I just felt like I was supposed to buy you these lamps. And it was the specific exact lamps that Amy had wanted from a store, and she just hadn't bought them. She just couldn't find the piece to buy them. But God spoke to somebody else and said, here, buy these lamps. And so I tell you that because everything that we've given away in our journey, we've always gotten back in abundance. We've always gotten back in full and then some. Every time. And so we have this idea that we're not supposed to give things away. But the Bible's very clear that you reap what you sow. And we just started taking that very, very seriously. And so we just said, you know what? It's not mine anyways. God gave us this stuff, but I'm a point guard. I'm supposed to find people and get them the ball. And so we just started giving stuff away. But it took being satisfied first, being content with what we had. And so until you get to a place of satisfaction and contentment, and that only comes through Jesus, until you get to that place, you're probably not ever going to experience true abundance because you have to reach a place of satisfaction first. And so we look at the story of Zacchaeus one more time. Once he understood the true satisfaction that he found in a relationship with Jesus, he went from a collector to a giver. And not only did he just give what was expected, but he gave in abundance. He gave back 4 times as much. And so it's the same for us today, right? When we experience the true satisfaction of Jesus, it's easy. It's easy to become an abundantly generous person. It's easy to be a triple-double giver. As a matter of fact, I don't think it's easy. I think it's inevitable. Like, I think once you really understand the satisfaction through Jesus, you can't help but to be generous. And you can't help but to do it abundantly because now you understand that God gave it everything. He gave us abundantly everything that we would ever need wrapped up in his son Jesus. And he gave it. He sacrificed it. And so I don't know where you're at today. I don't know what your deal is. I don't know how God's speaking to you. But I do know this, is that every person in this room, unlike every person that enters the NBA, every person in this room has the ability and the capability to become a triple-double giver. Everybody does. You possess that because you are made in the image of God. And if the Bible's true, then you inherit all of the gifts. You inherit everything that he put inside of you. It's in there. And so just like when you're looking for opportunities to give, when you're dribbling around just trying to find the open man, all you have to do is just go in your mind, you know what? I'm obedient with my first 10. I'm obedient with what God expects. But above that, starting at 11% and beyond, that's generosity. And be abundant with it. So if there's nothing else that you get out of today, I just hope, my prayer for everyone is that you walk out of here and you're looking for opportunities to pass the ball. You're just looking for an opportunity to put somebody in a position to score. You guys want to pray? Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for today. God, I thank you for a message that while not everybody relates to basketball, everybody does relate to your goodness, God. And I pray right now that people feel that, they understand that this is not a message of conviction, it's not a message of condemnation, it's simply a message of inspiration. And God, that we can do the little things in life. We can distribute the ball. We can distribute our money and our time and our talent in a way that would bring glory to you. And so, God, if everything that we do points people back to you, that's a win. And so, God, I pray today that everybody will move in one step closer to being a triple-double giver, not just in their money, but in their time, maybe with their family or with their friends or with their talents. God, the gifts that you've given them, share those gifts with the world. And God, I pray that if there's anybody in here that just doesn't have a relationship with you, God, I pray that maybe something I said today, maybe something you spoke through me, reach them and touch them in a way that they would be drawn closer to you. And so, God, we love you. We give you every single day, God. We give you everything that we do. It's all for your glory, God. We thank you for giving us joy so that we may bring all the good to the world around us. And so, God, just grow us, God. Continue to transform us and transform our thinking as it relates to generosity. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Love y'all.